the 2nd of August, 216 years before Christ, a Carthaginian general stood on a field in southern Italy and looked at the largest army Rome had ever put in one place. By evening, most of it was dead. Somewhere between 50 and 70,000 Roman soldiers were killed in a single afternoon. It is still one of the bloodiest days of fighting in European history, and the man who did it now stood 300 kilometers from Rome with nothing left in his way. He did not go. In our world, Hannibal turned south, and Rome went on to rule everything from Scotland to the Sahara. Change that one choice and the Senate is dissolved. Latin dies as a small local language, and there is no month called July. This is what happens when he takes the road north instead, and why the war that follows does not end at Rome. It only starts there. Start with who these two cities were. Carthage sat on the coast of what is now Tunisia, founded by traders from the eastern Mediterranean. For 500 years it did what trading cities do. It bought, sold, and shipped. Carthage did not really conquer. It made deals. Harbors in Sardinia, silver mines in Spain, grain ports along the African coast, a web of places that paid in, run by a council of rich families with 2 elected officials at the top. Rome worked the opposite way. Rome fought its neighbors, beat them, and then did something almost no ancient state did. It offered them a deal: fight for us, and in time you become one of us. That was the Roman machine. Dozens of Italian towns bound to Rome by treaty, each one owing soldiers. It meant Rome could lose an army and raise another the following spring. Remember that, because everything in this story turns on it. The two cities had already fought once over Sicily for 23 years. Rome won, took the island, and imposed a payment Carthage could not meet. A Carthaginian general named Hamilcar took his family to Spain to rebuild. His son was Hannibal. In 218, Hannibal took an army out of Spain, over the Pyrenees, across southern France, and over the Alps in autumn with elephants. He lost roughly half his men on the way. He arrived anyway. Then he did what should not have been possible. At the river Trebia that December, he destroyed a Roman army. The next summer at Lake Trasimene, he ambushed another in morning fog and killed a consul. Rome had lost 2 armies in 8 months. So Rome built the biggest army in its history. Around 80,000 men, twice what Hannibal had, under 2 consuls who took turns commanding on alternate days. They marched south to finish him. The place was called Cannae. What happened at Cannae is still taught in military academies. Hannibal put his weakest troops in the middle and let them be pushed backwards. The Roman line pressed forward into the gap, delighted, and kept pressing. Then his African veterans turned inwards from both sides, and his cavalry came round the back and closed the bag. 80,000 men were packed so tightly that many could not lift their arms. The killing went on for hours. 1 consul died on the field. The other rode away with a few dozen horsemen. Rome had no field army left in Italy, and the road north was open for the first time in nearly 200 years. That evening, according to a Roman historian writing much later, Hannibal's cavalry commander begged him to ride for Rome at once. In 5 days, he said, you will eat your dinner on the Capitol. Hannibal said no. He wanted to wait. That is what actually happened. Now change one thing: Hannibal listens. At first light, the cavalry turns north, and the army follows the coast road behind it. Nothing supernatural has occurred. A tired man simply took different advice. News of Cannae reached Rome before Hannibal did, and the city had days, not weeks, to decide what to do. There were no legions left to recall. The Senate shut the gates and put weapons into the hands of teenagers and slaves. 12 days later, the Carthaginian campfires were visible from the walls. Inside, the Senate reached for the oldest remedy it had. A Gaulish couple and a Greek couple were buried alive in the cattle market to buy the favor of the guards. Then Hannibal looked at the walls and understood his problem. Rome's defenses ran for 11 kilometers in stone, blocks the height of 3 men. He had no real siege train. Storming them would cost him the army he could not replace. So he did not try. Rome's strength was never the walls. It was the treaty list, the towns across Italy that owed her soldiers. Break the list, and the city inside the walls is just a city. He sent riders to every allied town in the south with the same message. Rome is finished. Your sons died at Cannae for her. Join me and keep your own laws, your own magistrates, and your own taxes. Capua went first. It was the 2nd richest city in Italy, and had always resented being second to Rome. Its gates opened without a fight, and Hannibal wintered his army there in comfort while the Senate watched the map come apart. After Capua, the collapse moved fast. Most towns in the south changed sides within a year, and across the water Syracuse tore up its Roman treaty. All of that happened in our world too, but there the Latin colonies of central Italy held firm. Here they do not. Tarentum, the great Greek port on the heel of Italy, opened its harbor to Carthaginian ships, and Metapontum, Thurii, and Lacri followed. That mattered more than any battle. Hannibal could now be supplied by sea from Africa instead of living off what he could take. Then came the letter that finished it. Philip, king of Macedon, had been watching from across the Adriatic, and he signed a treaty with Hannibal. Macedonian troops began landing on the Italian coast. What followed was not a storm, but a squeeze. Hannibal never assaulted the walls. He took the mills, took the river traffic, burned the fields, and closed the roads from Sicily, Sardinia, and the farms of Campania that Rome ate from. By the second winter, grain inside the city cost 20 times what it had. The public stores opened before dawn and were empty by mid-morning. People began leaving through the drains at night. Hunger did what siege engines could not. The Senate split. The old families wanted to hold out for the sons they still had in Spain. The traders and the poor wanted terms. Both sides were armed. Both had lost brothers at Cannae. In this timeline, letter writers never agree on who opened the gate. Some say the watch on the riverside simply walked away. What they agree on is the morning, a day in the spring of 214, when a Carthaginian army walked into Rome without a fight. Here Hannibal makes the decision that shapes the next 1,000 years. He does not burn Rome. His reasoning is cold rather than kind. A burned Rome becomes a story that unites Italy against him. A living Rome that pays every year is a warning, standing in plain sight. The terms are read out in the Senate House by a Carthaginian officer. Rome gives up everything outside Italy. The fleet is handed over. The army is capped at a size that cannot besiege anything, and Rome pays. 10,000 talents of silver over 50 years. In our world, the exact sum Rome would one day force on Carthage. The Senate keeps its building and its robes and loses everything else. Rome is a client state now, and the war ends in 211 with the opposite name on the treaty. Now jump forward 100 years to what a person alive in this timeline would call the present day. It is roughly 100 years before Christ, and the Mediterranean has settled into a shape our world never saw. Carthage is the strongest power in the Western Sea, and it runs that sea the only way it knows. There is no Carthaginian empire in the way we picture empires. There is a network, trading cities that pay a share, allied kings who keep their thrones and their armies, naval bases at the narrow points, client states left to their own affairs as long as the ships move and the silver arrives on time. In our world, the Romans would one day call this sea Mare Nostrum, our sea. Nobody calls it that here. It is not one state's lake. It is a market with a fleet attached, and the fleet is Punic. Because of that, the land north of it stays wild. Gaul is still dozens of Celtic kingdoms, the Arverni, the Aedui, the Sequani, trading wine and slaves south across the mountains, fighting each other and answering to nobody. Greece stays Greek. In our world, Rome would break Macedon and burn Corinth within 70 years of Cannae. Here Macedon backed the winner, so the Greek cities go on arguing among themselves in their own leagues, poorer, prouder, and free. Spain becomes the strangest place in this world. Punic on the coast, Iberian and Celtic inland, with silver towns where 3 languages are spoken in one street, and most of the guards have 2 names. And the center of gravity has moved. In our world, the wealth of the Mediterranean ran to Italy. Here it runs to Africa, the grain, the ivory, the gold coming up from the south. The rich end of this world is the North African coast. Carthage itself has perhaps 500,000 people and 3 harbors, one a circular naval basin cut into the ground with berths for over 200 warships. It is one of the largest cities on earth. 3 days' sail to the north sits Rome. Rome survived. That is the part people find hardest to believe. It was never burned, never emptied, never salted. It is a city of maybe 250,000 people, and by now it is rich again. It got rich the only way left to it. Cut off from conquest, Rome went into business, banking, shipping, contracts, insurance on cargoes. The men who once bought armor for a legion now buy shares in a voyage to Spain. Roman merchants learn Punic because the contracts are written in it. Roman families send their sons to study in Carthage the way our world's Romans sent theirs to Athens. Punic arches and Punic tomb carving turn up all over Italy. But the tribute is still paid every year, in public, in the Forum, counted by a Carthaginian officer. For 4 generations, Roman fathers have taken their children to watch and told them what happened on the day the gate opened, which brings us to where this timeline is going. Because the arrangement that has held for a century is quietly coming apart. and both sides can feel it. A network is not an empire, and that is its weakness as much as its strength. Carthage has no citizens outside Carthage. The allied kings, the client cities, the Numidian cavalry, every one of them is loyal because it pays, not because it belongs. Rome's old machine turned outsiders into Romans. The Carthaginian one turns them into customers, and a customer leaves the moment somebody offers a better price. Around the year 100, a Roman officer starts to matter. He is not a senator. He commands the small army Rome is permitted, and he claims descent from a young tribune who survived Cannae, walked off the field, and refused to leave Italy. His argument has been waiting 100 years for somebody to say out loud. Carthage humiliated Rome. Rome paid. Rome is still paying. And Carthage, for all its ships, has no army of its own. That last part is the crack in the whole structure. Carthage fights with hired men and allied kings. It has always been able to afford them. It has never had to ask whether they would die for it. Rome has the opposite problem and the opposite advantage. No money and no fleet, and several 100,000 men in Italy who grew up on one story. So he goes around the treaty. He does not raise a legion. He raises a private army of the landless and the poor, paid for by Roman bankers who are tired of taking their orders in Punic. And the towns of Italy come with him. Not out of love for Rome, many still remember opening their gates to Hannibal, but because a century as second-tier customers of an African trading house has left them poorer than they expected. The first real question is Numidia. The Numidian kings sell the best light cavalry in the world, and they sell it to Carthage. In our timeline, one of those kings changed sides, and it decided the war. Rome will make the same offer here. Carthage responds the way trading powers always respond first. It raises the price. It hires more men, buys more ships, and lends money to the Roman senators who want no part of this. For a while, that works. Hired soldiers have a limit, and Carthage found it once already. When the first war with Rome ended and the money ran out, its own mercenaries turned on it and nearly took the city. Everyone in this story knows that story. The war that is coming will not look like Hannibal's. No elephants, no Alps. It will be fought over harbors, Sicily, Sardinia, the Spanish Silver Coast, because whoever holds the harbors starves the other, and the roles have swapped completely. Carthage is the established power now, with the fleet, the money, and the empire to lose. Rome is the hungry one, with nothing to lose and a grievance 100 years old. Whoever wins decides what the next 1,000 years sound like. If Carthage holds, the Mediterranean stays a trading network, and the languages of Europe grow out of Punic and Greek and Celtic. If Rome wins, it wins angry, and it will not offer terms twice. Come back to our world for a moment. All of that turns on one evening, one piece of advice, and one man who decided to wait. Because Hannibal waited, Rome kept its allies, raised another army, and won. Latin spread across a continent. Spanish, French, Portuguese, Italian, and Romanian are all Latin, slowly changed. The alphabet on this screen is Roman. 2 of our months are named after Romans. None of that exists in the other timeline. Not because Rome was destroyed, Rome survived there and got rich. It simply never got the chance to become the thing that made all of it, a machine for turning conquered people into citizens. Which leaves the harder question. Was Rome's real weapon the legions, or the offer that came after them? And if it was the offer, what does that say about every power since that has preferred to buy loyalty rather than share it?